Hey, Pastor Josh here. We're reading Acts chapter 21, verses 1 through 6. Here's a question that I ask myself. I'm sure you ask yourself this too. What to do? What do I do? This is going to be something that's going to be a little bit problematic as we look at the Apostle Paul approaching Jerusalem. We've already gotten a sense from what he has said to the Ephesian elders. We've gotten a sense that when he goes to Jerusalem, there's going to be trouble there, and that the Apostle Paul in his heart is convinced that is what he needs to do. He needs to go to Jerusalem, and he needs to get there by the festival of Pentecost. He's trying to get there. He's trying to get there quickly. But other church members, other people, other Christians at places that he visits, seems to be saying, Paul, don't go down there. Don't you go. It's going to be trouble for you. But the Apostle Paul in his heart knows and is convinced the Spirit is leading him to go there. So what do you do when you have this sort of conflict in your heart? I'm not going to necessarily resolve it as we read the text, but I think I'll give you a few principles to think through as you're trying to decide what is it exactly that the Lord would have me to do. So let's run into our passage. We're starting in chapter 21. You've probably already got a sense of the language in the book of Acts. Toward the end of the book, it gets a bit tedious. It's mentioning a lot of cities and places and journeys, and it has turned into a major travel log, a major description of travel. Now, we've seen that already with the Apostle Paul, but this seems to get very, very tedious in mentioning all of these various cities and places as he's going. And so the effect that Luke is trying to give us is one of suspense, one of an ominous feeling, almost like that old movie Jaws, the dun-dum, dun-dum, dun-dum. It's trying to give you that feel as you stop to each city, saying, okay, as he's getting closer to Jerusalem, it's going to get... there's something dangerous that's waiting for him there. And then the cry out of all of the Christians that he visits ends up getting more pronounced. We're going to see that as he visits this place in Tyre. We're going to see it as he even gets closer. There's going to be a prophet that's going to tie up the Apostle Paul's belt. And so basically all the Christians are shouting, don't go, Paul. But Paul is saying, I have to go. This is what I need to do. And so even this ominous march to Jerusalem, as Paul visits all of these cities, it's the same type of march that that Jesus himself feels as he goes to Jerusalem. And the Gospel of Luke gives us that same cadence. If you read particularly the last half of the book of Luke, Luke will tell us, remember Luke wrote Acts as well, Luke will say that Jesus set his face like flint, set his face like a hard rock toward Jerusalem. He was determined to go, and you still have that same feel as Jesus gets closer and closer to Jerusalem. So I really think that Luke is wanting us to see that Paul is in reality following his master, following his Lord to the T, and that he is going to Jerusalem and something bad is going to befall him, just as it did to Jesus. So let's get to our text. And when we had parted from them and set sail, we came by a straight course to Kos, the next day to Rhodes, which is an island, and from there to Patara. And having found a ship crossing to Phoenicia, we went abroad and set sail. When we had come in the sight of Cyprus, leaving it on the left, we sailed to Syria and landed at Tyre, for there the ship was to unload its cargo. All of these cities and mentionings are supposed to give you that Jaws feel, the dun-dum, dun-dum. He's getting closer here. I'll give you a map to help you out a little bit here. Here's Miletus. the place where he met the Ephesian elders. You see Ephesus right up here. They all came down and met with him there. We covered that in our last reading, and I gave you the entire speech that Paul gives to those elders in Miletus. They're the Ephesian elders, and they visit him at Miletus. Also want to point out here some of these cities here: Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Hierapolis, not Hierapolis, but Ephesus, Smyrna, Laodicea, Colossus. Those should sound familiar to you if you've ever, not Colossus either, but Laodicea. Those should sound familiar to you if you've read the book of Revelation, because these are some of those churches that the Apostle John will write the Revelation to. So here is the Apostle Paul, and then when there's Kos, we saw that in our reading. Stop at Rhodes, they go over to Patara, they come down past Cyprus, and now they're at Tyre. So they have now arrived in the Phoenician city of Tyre. Remember, Phoenicia is an area controlled by the Roman Empire, as all of these areas are, and there is Tyre and Sidon, Jerusalem down here. Traditional Jerusalem would have been around in this, traditional Israel, as far as what they actually owned, would have been here in this area. There's the Jordan River as well, and as we're going to be coming into the book of Acts, remember that the Israelites will cross the Jordan River on this way into the Promised Land. So now the Paul is in Tyre, working his way down to Jerusalem in this ominous way. They're here at Tyre, and they're going to stop, and they're going to seek out the disciples. And having sought out the disciples, we stayed there for 7 days. And that's a good example for us to follow, to seek out other Christians. And then this Greek word, seek out, sought out, really is giving us the flavor that they didn't know these people. Like, they were trying to make new friends. Like, where's the church at? We need to meet these people. And so they sought them out. They got to know them. The best thing for you and me as Christians is to get to know other Christians. And as you meet them and as you develop relationships, the Lord is going to use those in a mighty way. And we're going to see that even over these 7 days, that these Christians, their hearts were knitted together and just tied up with the Apostle Paul. So Luke and the Apostle Paul, they're staying there for 7 days. We know it's Luke because he's using that word we. So Luke is along for the ride. And through the Spirit, here's the whole thing. What do I do? And through the Spirit, they were telling Paul not to go to Jerusalem. So obviously, there's a promise that when Paul gets to Jerusalem, it's not going to be good. That's a clear promise. And so even the church in Tyre, as they are speaking with the Apostle Paul, realize he's going to Jerusalem, they're just having a sense in their hearts, say, no, Paul, you do not need to go to Jerusalem. Because something bad is going to happen to him there. Now, we're going to see, as we keep marching toward Jerusalem, the Apostle Paul is saying, no, I need to go despite what is in front of me. The Spirit is testifying to me in all the places that something bad is going to hit me in Jerusalem, but I need to go anyway, even though all the Christians are begging me not to go. Again, this is problematic for us. When we have a deep conviction within our hearts, drawn from the Bible, drawn from the mission that God has given us, of what we need to do, and then everyone else around us is telling us not to go, that is problematic. Normally, we should listen to the Christians around us. We should listen to them and take their counsel, especially as they are reading the Scriptures and giving us good biblical evidence. Now, what it's going to appear, and I'll try to point this out as we get closer and closer. If I don't, I'm going to do it here at least, is that the reason the Christians are telling Paul not to go is because they don't want something bad to happen to him, and they don't want some sort of risk to happen. And so that is not one of the controlling factors as we make decisions. Being a Christian is risky. We will have to do risky things. And so any argument that's saying you don't need to do this because it's risky or it's dangerous is not a biblical argument. It's not a good biblical argument, because obviously Jesus, our great Lord and Savior, was crucified. And Jesus said, if I was persecuted, you're going to be persecuted as well. And Paul is following in the footsteps of Jesus, as we are too as well. So any argument to say, hey, it's risky, it's dangerous, you don't need to do it. Well, but if it involves proclaiming Jesus Christ, if it involves doing good, then it doesn't matter if it is risky or not. So I think that's an element here. But I think most of the time when I'm thinking about myself, and I'm thinking about other people too, is that we need to take in the counsel of other believers as well. Is Paul listening to the Spirit by going? I would say yes, he is, and that the churches are saying don't go because we're afraid something bad is going to happen to you. Others will say, yeah, Paul should have listened to the church. He should have not went down to Jerusalem, and he would have been fine. He would have been doing some other great missionary works and adventures. But either way, when Paul arrives to Jerusalem, he has promised that something bad for sure is going to happen. Verse 5, when our days were there ended, we departed and went on our journey. So they stayed there for 7 days, and they all, with wives and children. So the whole family is going down to the beach to send the Apostle Paul off. That's how